Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our event, My Life, My Business. Wish I was here. I just wanted to point out today that wish I was here is a reminder that we don't want to live a wistful life of regret. So rather intentionally live your life on purpose, for a purpose, and being fully present. It's the only guarantee you're going to have to enjoy what you do and to enjoy this journey called life. So, our previous topic, it was on a topic by me called Business Nuggets from a novice biker. And the first chapter is available either on Playbook here on Clubhouse, or you can go and listen to um, the podcast on the YouTube channel, the Mufasa Coaching Practice. So tonight we're having Shanaz again, and who always has some interesting little nuggets to encourage us with, and to remind us that we can live life within our control. And that's a belief. So, Shanaz, welcome to you. Welcome, Julia. And for those of you listening, um, put on your seatbelts. It's time to go for a fantastic ride. Over to you, Shanaz.
Hi, thank you, Jock. Thanks for that. Right, so I was thinking about the podcast that you did on the book that you are doing, and then the process of that, and it was about how you came into coaching, and so it reminded me that you must have sat down and really thought, you went through different seasons. I think where maybe that phase of where you were in corporate kind of came to a completion. And so what I thought we're going to do this evening is talk about something. It's called the fertile void, and it's a gestalt concept, and I love this idea, and it's really helped me in times when I felt kind of stuck. So the idea of the fertile void comes from a gestalt therapy or gestalt psychology concept, and it's the idea that the void, it's called the fertile void, meaning that there's lots growing and going there in this emptiness. And so a lot of the Gestalt coaches, they'll ask, how can something empty be full? And so tonight I'm just going to kind of explore that a bit, and how we can use this idea of the fertile void to live a more fuller life, a more present life, as you kind of introduced us. So, how does the fertile void feel? What is that in our life? So what they believe that the fertile void is, that we all go through this experience at some point in time where nothing stands out as being particularly interesting, and we have perhaps no energy directed towards a particular project, for example. And so, in a sense, the fertile void is a natural consequence to stopping after completing something. So, there's no situation that needs to be resolved. The project is completed. There's no unfinished situation, and there's nothing that kind of draws our attention um, at that moment. And so the one of the coaches who wrote the book, I'm not really basing the talk on the book, but it's just really, he mentions it. He says that it's a paradox that when we have nothing going on, although this nothing, and a feeling like nothing can feel empty, it's actually full at the same time. And so when you think about it, about the seasons, and even when we are growing and planting land, there's a time that the farmer and in the agricultural world, they leave the land to rest before it grows, and usually this takes place over winter. And so the problem that some coaches in organizations have found, particularly I'm working with sort of Gestalt coaches, is that they say that what they've experienced is that it's very difficult in organizations and sometimes in our life, um, to kind of find this fertile void, this empty space. We tend to fear it, we tend to avoid it because it's uncomfortable. And for example, they mention how in our lives and in organizations there's this constant drive to achieve and to deliver more. And what they suggest is that when we are constantly being driven to achieve and deliver on a constant level, we skip out this a stage of our experience. So when they talk about our experience, you can think of it as a cycle, a cycle of awareness, a cycle of growth, or a cycle of experience. So in other words, we can go when we think of a project, right? So we have a need to kind of attend to a problem arises, and then what we will do is we will engage in that project, we will jump into the action phase, we will mobilize all our resources. And then what would happen is that what is supposed to naturally happen is that we are supposed to experience a sense of completion and a sense of withdrawal, or what they say, the fertile void. But what is happening is that they've noticed that many leaders in organizations are on this, or and for many of us, we are on that hamster wheel which turns continuously all the time, and it leads to a lot of exhaustion and despair. And what they're saying is that what is actually happening is that instead of going to this phase in a project or in an experience or in a situation, it can even be a partnership or a relationship. Instead of experiencing that sense of completion, that sense of achievement or withdrawal for a bit, what we are doing is we are jumping from action phase into action phase into action phase. And what they say is that this makes us feel that we have no sense of making any progress because we are missing parts of an important cycle of experience. For example, by taking a few minutes, even out of a day or out of a situation, for some kind of ceremony or ritual in which the achievement that we've accomplished is named, and we appreciate and we exchange this, and with others. And what this sense of taking time out to appreciate the completion of the project, the completion of a goal reached, the completion of something that we've achieved, when we skip this phase and we jump into the next project without really experiencing a sense of withdrawal or a sense of emptiness or that voidedness, um, is that we will become exhausted. And in fact, what will happen is that we will then lack creativity. And what then does happen is that we also lose satisfaction in what we are doing. And so, what they are suggesting is that what we do need are moments then of inner quiet where we experience satisfaction and withdrawal from one thing. And when we experience the satisfaction and withdrawal from one project or one event or one achievement, it then generates what they call the fertile void before we start to pay attention to the next thing and the next priority that needs to get done. So, what they suggest is that the fertile void then is the space that between that's done and what is next. And the important thing is that we do take a break between the that's done and what is next. And so, what does this actually feel like in reality? Sometimes it's about that that we need to experience the in between feeling, and it's to embrace that. And I guess this is where that the phrase, we always hear that popular phrase that says trust the process. This is the process that we are needing to trust, where we feel stuck perhaps. It can feel like, this is boring. It can feel like, oh my word, I don't know what to do with myself. But what they suggest is to embrace this in between feeling of, I'm finished with this project, but I'm not yet motivated to start the next. And what they say is to stay with this feeling, to stay with the in between feeling, because what this staying with this in between feeling will actually inspire a renewed sense of purpose, and it can inspire motivation. And so, what they suggest then, that this sense of feeling empty is then part of a cycle of growing, of experience, and of development in the field that we're in the project that we're in the relationship that we feel. So one can feel stuck in a situation. One can feel stuck in a relationship. That doesn't mean that it's in trouble. In other words, this is the perfect opportunity to grow. And what they say is that, in other words, you may feel empty right now, but you won't feel empty forever. And what we need to do is we need to lean into the emptiness and therefore trust the process. And I was actually kind of thinking about this, and I remember that even biblically it talks about, when you think of Genesis 1 verse 2, it actually talks about the earth was formless and void, or a waste and emptiness. And when we look at that particular chapter in Genesis, we see the creation kind of happening. And so when we are feeling stuck, what they are asking and what they are saying is that that feeling of stuck can actually, if we stay with it, it can generate those feelings of emptiness, the feelings of stuck, even those feelings of boredom can generate hopefulness, can generate new projects, new birth, and you can recreate yourself in those moments. I was also thinking about some of us who are, everything is being done in person. We have stepped away from, in a sense, the COVID sense of how we used to do things, and maybe some people are feeling stuck. I see how my students are really being challenged coming up to class on a regular basis. And what I see is that how we need to reinvent this hybrid model of thinking and doing things. But currently, what I sense is that within academia, there is a sense of feeling stuck because, we are in that in between phase, that transition phase. However, as I was saying, that out of this feeling of being stuck, of not being sure what happens next, amazing things can happen. And, I was kind of thinking of that sense of feeling of completeness that you had, Jacques, when you kind of went into the coaching business. What I also wanted to say is that the fertile void can feel like you've lost interest in your goals. It can also feel like, there's nothing important happening in your life. It can also feel like, your job is boring. But at the same time, it's amazing how, when we are in that phase, while it can feel boring, if we really understand this feeling of emptiness and we embrace it, and we don't see it as something that we need to push aside, what we will also see is that while we are stuck in that job, it can also fulfill and meet other needs. While we are stuck in that relationship or a situation, it's also meeting other needs. And so, what they suggest then is that often we try and we think that we want to find a path forward, but somehow we somewhere between giving up on what once motivated us and finding a new motivation. So the idea is that what is then suggested is that the fertile void then is actually can be a state of being, and it can be a practice. So in other words, when we practice, when we are completed with a project and we celebrate it and we withdraw from it, then we actually can give space and way for new projects to emerge. So, in that sense, it's like we are resting our land, we are giving new space for new growth. But if I'm going to constantly hop from one project to the next without really completely withdrawing and ending of a project, and spending some time, it doesn't have to be like a whole month or a year. It can be depending on what you find yourself in, but it could be a day or two where you end off something, and you celebrate that achievement. And so what they say is that what the fertile void then can be the state and a practice. So when we want to experience this fertile void, what we could do perhaps is that while we'll experience maybe confusion and and the reality that I'm bored by the situation, I'm feeling stuck, we do have an opportunity, however, to observe what's going on with us, what our thoughts and our feelings and emotions are. So we actually come into the present, and isn't being fully present in our life so important to enjoying what we achieve? And they say that it's an uncomfortable sensation, but this exposes us to awareness, and it creates this vacuum when we actually observe our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions, and we allow ourselves to feel empty. What can actually emerge from this void is a wonderful knowledge and truths about ourselves and our and what's going on for us, way better than when we are constantly focused on the next goal and the next action and the next priority. What this space of just experiencing emptiness, or experience even a slight boredom in our situation, is so meaningful for us and can really be a launch pad for future creative ideas, and experiencing our life more fully. Um, and so, how can we? They suggest a few ways in which we can use the idea of the fertile void in our life and our organization. And what they suggest is that, do you have in mind immediate and achievable goals and targets that you can complete and feel completely satisfied about? And do you, when you have completed them, allow yourself at least the space of 3 or 4 breaths to recognize that you have completed and achieved something before allowing the next most pressing priority to clamor you for attention? So it's really also about celebrating your achievements. I think that what I actually discovered is that the Americans are really good at this, but I find that in academia and in our society, South African society, we don't celebrate achievements as much. And here I'm not talking about big achievements, I'm talking about the little milestones in your project. I'm talking about the little milestones in your relationships. How long have you known a friend? Celebrate the length of that friendship. We friendships go through so many things, or celebrate a partnership or a collaboration. And there are many ways that we can celebrate it. Just the fact that one has maintained a partnership or collaboration for so long is an indication that something is working and it needs celebration. The other thing is what they suggest is you know, to mark this with a ritual or a ceremony. So it doesn't have to be a party, it could just be a recognition for your staff or within the organization. And another thing that they actually also suggest then is that what what we need to do is to think about what do we need at the end of the day, where we can have a few minutes just to have an empty mind, or a few minutes at the end of our day where we can have a time for peaceful retreat. And they mention an IT director who the coach went to visit, and he asked her to give him a few minutes, because he was just trying to gather his thoughts at the end of the day. He just wanted an empty mind for a few minutes, and she actually realized the value of that empty mind for a few minutes, because what it was doing, it was giving this director an opportunity to rethink, to withdraw from the pressures of the day, and an opportunity to kind of weigh up what has been achieved for the day, so that he can actually have that space, that fertile void, to kind of launch into the next activity for the next day, rather than, immediately going from meeting to meeting, and rather from going from action plan to action plan. So what would it need for you to do? What would you need to do to kind of have a few minutes of retreat at the end of the day, where you are withdrawing from your priorities, from being busy all the time? It could be that for some of us it's going to be a walk, it could be a sporting activity, it could be a nice view from a balcony, it could even be a warm bath. Where can you find just a few minutes for you to just have that peaceful retreat? And so that you can find that fertile void, which will allow you to kind of, launch those amazing ideas that you have. But if we don't withdraw and have a time between projects, have a time between, so I've done this, so what's next, to actually think about that time, we can lose our sense of momentum. We can find that our work and our relationships no longer satisfy us. And we will have a sense of, we can become hopeless, because it will feel like we're not achieving anything, that we're never completing anything, that something is never, that what we are doing is never enough. And so this is really important for us to kind of enjoy our life and be fully present. And so, kind of what I'd like to then kind of conclude with is that they say that when we let ourselves go into the emptiness of this void, fullness, regeneration, and creation can emerge. And that is why it's called the fertile void, because actually the void and the emptiness that we experience is not really empty, but only if we're just willing to engage with it. And so for me, that is when they talk about trusting the process, is that even if this process is not indicating anything to me now, I'm not motivated, but if I can just embrace the boredom, the emptiness for a while, then I can actually see what emerges. And I think that this has helped me when I've tried new things. Often as a perfectionist, we want to get it right the first time. But I have needed to learn that there are some of my work tasks. I'm thinking of writing, for example. I do enjoy writing, but there's a lot of my writing, when you're writing an article or you're busy writing, publishing a paper, a lot of it is boring things. And sometimes I just, and I have no ideas, or I feel stuck, or I feel like this is a creative block. But what I realize then often is, if I stay with that emptiness and the total boredom of a situation, that what then emerges then is really such creativity, new ideas. And if it's a relationship or a friendship, it actually regenerates, and that's how we maintain our community and our support. So thank you. That's me.
You know what I find interesting is as I was thinking about why people really battle with this place of having a peaceful retreat or just embracing that sense of discomfort. Nothing is happening, sense of boredom, and then you begin to question, am I being of value and of worth? And the thought popped in for me, and I thought, I need to ask you. So, what happens when people feel that to be in this kind of perpetual motion of doing things, pursuing activities, the next thing and the next thing, it's because they're afraid that they will lose momentum. And just as I thought it, you actually alluded to the fact that you keep your momentum, you maintain it, and it's like, okay, but how does that work?
I think that keeping your momentum is not about being busy. What it actually is about um, is trying to understand what is this emptiness about. It's about being aware about your emotions, about your feelings. It's also about the situation. It's also being aware about what you have achieved. So, in other words, it's not about sitting still. Emptiness doesn't mean we need to sit still. There's still a job and a task for us to do. And so, it's about questioning ourselves. Why am I feeling like this? What is it about this? And even if we have to question ourselves on a daily basis, eventually it will kick in the natural process of something will emerge, something new will emerge. There'll be something that will draw our attention. We will become creative. But it's about understanding that the emptiness is part of this entire process. It's the part of the process of growth and learning and doing and taking part in something. Whether that's a project, whether that's a collaboration or a relationship, that the empty feeling, or the feeling that nothing is happening or this is bored, is part of the process. But it's not going to stay there. We will eventually kick into something new that will emerge. But I think that people give up on the feeling of boredom too soon, because we need to keep busy, we need novelty. And in this day and age, our society, we are constantly bombarded with new information and new technology. And new things to keep us busy. So it's about understanding that emptiness is part of the creative process as well, in any project, in any organization as well.
Yeah, well said. I mean, the whole aspect that every farmer knows that some portion of the land must be kept fallow or must be rested for regeneration, for the much needed nutrients. It's pretty much the same. So, but it's so practical in a way. Just understanding. You and I have been talking a lot about this, taking breaks, time out, to think, and rather than to find yourself being exhausted, because as you now point out, just being busy, moving from the one thing to the next, feeling, but that is high productivity, and then you say, trust this process, and I think it's the test is to try it so that you can trust it, which means there's nothing for you to lose and you're talking about minutes is to get into that state, empty your mind out. And it's not in terms of Mark Gango's whole issue around nothing boxes where nothing needs to happen when you empty your mind. This is not emptying your mind in the way I understand it, and leaving a vacuum just means you don't start thinking about the next thing, but you allow yourself the opportunity to reflect on what has been and to celebrate it enough. What was, you said, what have I achieved, and to celebrate that achievement quite deliberately, because that energy builds on itself, and that feeling of, I guess, is wow. Being able to look back, we've spoken about different things around, okay, taking time out, smell the roses, notice where you are. But that appreciation is like when you're eating, you're not mindlessly eating, you're enjoying your meal. All your senses are engaged, and it's the same thing, is to step back, think about the project. And I also like the phrase, the in-between phase, where you're describing it as a sense of boredom, not knowing where to go to next, knowing there's something around the corner, but not being impatient. And I guess this is the thing. In order for you to trust the process, you also got to learn how to be patient and do this. If you want energy for the next phase of your journey, for the next project, is gather that energy by celebrating your achievements. And that is just basically, out of the richness of this entire talk, I'm just kind of extracting a practical tidbit for myself, as usual. But Shanaz, that was absolutely wonderful. For those of you listening, I just want to encourage you, is that if you want to wrap your head around this concept of what is a fertile void, sure. But the point is, once you begin to understand it, we don't just want to grow your knowledge. We want you to actually apply some of these things that we talk about, so that you can experience an abundant life, a life that is joyous, a life that is present. So, yeah, more tools for us to use. Thank you, Shanaz.
Thank you, Jacques. Yes, and so as I said, it's not necessarily about a mindfulness activity. If you are into that, you can do that. It's literally taking some time between projects to gather yourself, to, as you said, reflect and think about what is next, and what has gone before, so that you can really appreciate and allow that creative process to continue.
Wonderful. All right, then, our time is up. We look forward to next week, where you can certainly join us again live or listen to the playback. But once again, thank you, Julia, and a special thank you to Shanaz. Until we meet again next week at precisely 5:30. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.